want you to know that I think we are, all of us, doing a very good job with the town's, the taxpayers' money. And that's a tribute to all of us that we have such a good system in place.
Thank you. And again, for the record, the auditors found, I can't remember the technical terms. Actually, I can find them here, but they found no significant findings. They had no complaints, and the actual term was they had no compliance or internal control findings, which sounds terrible, but it's actually very good. It means they've had no compliance issues and they had no control issues in their findings. So congratulations.
And to all of us.
Yeah. Okay, anything more?
That's it.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to old business, and I would entertain a motion to, did we table this last week? Or did we just not act on it? We discussed but didn't act. We tabled? Okay. So I would entertain a motion to remove from the table the first item.
So moved. Counselor Ingalls.
And is there a second? Councillor Song, second. So the motion is to adopt a proposed ordinance providing for property tax exemptions for farm buildings and additional exemption for farm machinery in the town of Ledyard, as contained in the draft dated November 18th. And I believe that the land use committee approved or recommended and put forward to the finance committee an ordinance for farm buildings. I don't recall that they also had one for machinery. Does anyone recall that? Maybe I'm remembering.
I have to say, I'm losing track of what we've talked about. I feel like we need to bring this one home already.
Yep.
Goodness.
Yeah, so,
I thought.
Dan has some clarification.
Is this the one, Bill, that we, I thought we sent a couple of questions off to Adriana.
We did, and she's present to answer those questions. So what happened with this ordinance, as soon as we added the additional exemption for farm machinery, it got tangled up. And one of the things that we realized was that there is already an exemption for farm machinery. And then enter Public Act 490 for classifying farmland as agricultural, and it got confusing. And we just, put the whole thing on hold, realized that we're far astray from where we originally started, which was to provide an exemption for farm buildings. So as I recall, the land use committee approved the property tax exemption for farm buildings, but not for farm machinery. And then it came to us 2 weeks ago, and we had questions about the numbers provided by the tax assessor. And the reason we had questions is we want to make sure that we haven't opened the door for significant losses in tax revenue as a result of implementing this ordinance. And my thought was we should just approve the farm buildings because we have solid numbers and there are no contingencies and complexities with that. So having said that, Adriana, if you had any comments you could share with us, maybe we can get this cleared up and act on it.
Sure, Bill. I can let you know that you had questions where I had notated that people might currently qualify or they might qualify in the foreseeable future. And I took the ones that are going to qualify under the income or loss provisions of this. You need to either generate $15,000 in income or you have to spend $15,000 on your farm. These farms that are in just Public Act 490, many of them are fallow land at this point, or they're used for haying and things like that. I know an example would be the Mayor's Family's farm where they bale hay. If they bale 100 bales of hay at $5 a piece, that's only $5,000. So that's not something that they would qualify for at this time. So that was I made those notations there.
Okay,
And for the building loss, looking at the way the statute is written, and I looked at the draft ordinance that you have, this could be up to $100,000 per building.
Yep.
At this point, I don't foresee that being a huge loss. I think the numbers that I had given you are still quite manageable, and I did notice that there was a caveat for a cap in the ordinance. So I have to say I think this may be a good move for you. I don't really have any other recommendations for you.
okay. So to recap the numbers for farm buildings, the present potential tax loss, if we approve this ordinance, would be $11,615 in taxes. So that's tax revenue we would
Correct.
lose.
Yes.
If all of the farms that could qualify invested in $100,000 worth of buildings, then the total potential tax loss would still only be $28,000.
That is
So-
correct.
That to me is a no-brainer. The machinery one is where we started to get tangled up. So
And I can say at this point, because there's the state mandated exemption, most of our farmers don't even qualify for that, all of that yet. So even if they
Okay.
decide to purchase some pretty big equipment, as you can see the amount to the max, if you're looking at the spreadsheet at all, a lot of these are $80,000, $90,000. I mean, that's still a lot of equipment they can invest in, where they're still going to benefit from an exemption whether you pass this or not.
Yep. Okay.
So
And
I
that-
mean,
that
just
would
looking
be-
at this, I mean, the only one that would benefit from this at this time would be Ricky Holmberg.
Okay.
Bill,
And you're showing it. Go ahead.
I have a question for Adriana. So you're saying if machinery, they can apply on their own?
Up to $100,000. That is correct.
Okay, but they don't need a town ordinance to do that?
They do not. They are already taking advantage of that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And who funds that? Is it the town or is it the state funding that, Adriana?
It is non-funded, state mandated.
So the town suffers the loss if they qualify, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And
Just to
so I
note,
believe-
just to note,
Go ahead.
the draft that the land use committee forwarded does not provide for exemptions for farm machinery. They removed that from the proposal.
thank you. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay. So we need to make a friendly amendment to our motion. I think, correct, Roxanne? Should we remove the additional exemptions for farm machinery in the name of
Right,
the proposed?
That was just a carryover from the old motion. The actual title does no longer contains the word machinery.
Okay,
It just says for buildings, and the additional for farm machinery should be out.
okay. So, Andrea,
The
would you accept?
For 8 feet does not include that.
Okay. So, Councilor Ingalls, would you accept a friendly amendment to remove the words "and additional exemption for farm machinery"
Yes.
from your motion? Okay, thank you. All right, so we're back to buildings only. Estimated current tax revenue loss to the town is $11,615. If everyone took advantage of it to the full amount, the town's liability and tax loss would be $28,000. We say as a town, or at least as a council, and many people in town say that we are an agricultural town. We want to support agriculture. I see this as a good way to support our farmers. It allows us to continue to retain and put open space to use with minimal impact on the town, because every acre of farmland that goes to housing, as we know, has a potential higher cost to the town than leaving it open. So I'll stop there and see if there are other comments from anyone. Councilor Malone? You're
None.
mute now. Okay, good. And Andrea shook her head no, so I think we're ready to vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Counselor Ingalls votes aye.
Counselor Malone votes aye.
And Councilor Solomon votes aye, and this will move on to the council for final vote. Thank you very much. Motion passed.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Okay, is there any other old business to come before the committee? Hearing none, I'll move on to new business and look for a motion on the first item.
I move to grant a bid waiver to Charles Pasterak. Is that how you say it? Junior Inc. for paving and incidental services for the 2021 calendar year.
Second.
Councilor Malone seconds. Discussion. I'll leave this. I'll turn this to Public Works Director Maslin for his comment.
Well, this actually kind of was somewhat unanticipated because for the first time in the time I've been here and in the time I've used the state bid for these services, the state chose not to bid it again, but rather to extend the terms of last year's bid through this calendar year. So this kind of just naturally lined up with what we had decided to do with Pasterak services last year. And I felt rather than, of course, when I'm originally was waiting for the new bid to come out and would know the terms of that at some point before construction season, before I would have needed to make any recommendation and hopefully not needed to actually seek a bid waiver. But in light of the way this unfolded, it just made sense. And the only thing I would say is if we felt that there were any reason why we shouldn't extend this for another year to Pasterak, it would have to do with his workmanship in some way. And I think if you were to go to any of the streets or projects that he did last year, you would say that we'd be happy to have his work this year or have him do our work this year in the extensive areas that it looks like we'll have funding to do.
Thank you, Steve. Councilor Malone, Councilor Engel, comments, questions?
Just that I've been on this committee long enough that Steve comes back every year to ask us to grant a bid waiver to this particular contractor because of the excellence of service, the reputation. So I have no problem.
Okay, Tom? Okay, so I'll just comment that paving is a very complicated business. It's very competitive, and there are many players in the industry, and I'll leave it at that. We are confident, based on the recommendations of staff and the experience we've had with this paver, that this is a good value for the town. The lowest bid is not always the best value, and in the case of paving, that becomes extremely important. So we've seen roads that have broken up just a few years after being paved, but they were not paved by this contractor. So a good job in paving is an investment, and the value is important. So I'll leave it at that and see if there are any other comments. And if not, are you ready to vote? All in favor, please say aye.
Counselor Ingalls votes aye.
Tom, you're still mute. Are you still with us?
We saw you unmute and remute, but we did not hear your words.
Maybe you can put it in the chat.
Yep, he might be having. John, can you chat?
Counselor
There he is.
Malone votes aye.
There we go.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Tom. Councilor Solomon votes aye, and the motion passes. And I would entertain a motion for the second item on the agenda.
I make a motion to authorize the mayor to enter into, just scroll down, enter into an agreement with the town of Stonington for repairs to the Lantern Hill Road Bridge over Whitford Brook.
Is there a second?
Counselor Malone seconds.
Thank you, Tom. So, Steve, do you want to take this one as well?
Well, this particular bridge has a long history of issues, or history of recognition of issues. Some of it has been documented and presented in the attachments that you have, but there are more extensive files that go back to the mid-1980s, not so much that far back with respect to the physical condition of the bridge in terms of its deterioration, but in terms of its narrowness and the safety issues that relate to two-way traffic at that spot. So just quickly, as you are aware and have heard in various ways in the last few years anyway, Ledyard and Stonington, working under an MOU that was crafted in 2016, I believe, had arrived at a point through mutual expenditure of nearly $90,000 each to secure completed, approved, and permitted plans for a suitable complete replacement of this bridge. And we were poised to proceed. And then the Board of Finance and the town of Stonington effectively pulled the plug by not following through on the Stonington end of the MOU, which was to fund all the way through construction. So we were left as a town having budgeted funds on our end to proceed in accordance with the provisions of the state local bridge program. And we were unable to proceed, of course. And our permit for the plans that have been approved expires in August. We would have had to have at least, I think, secured a contractor by then, maybe even broken ground by then. So that's not going to happen. So I'm not saying that all of that $180,000 to $200,000 was for naught, because it could maybe be reprocessed, maybe renewed by way of a permit. It would have cost something to go that route, but we stand without any mutual agreement at this point to proceed with construction. In the interim period of time, I'm not sure it was a deathbed conversion, but Stonington got excited about their bridges in general and contracted or secured the services of WMC Consulting Engineers, who was the engineer actually that did the plans on behalf of both towns. Secured their services to do a comprehensive evaluation of their bridges in town. And so in particular, they asked WMC to do a more thorough investigation of this particular bridge, at which point WMC sent a letter or concluded that it was in really bad shape. And you see there's a letter that I've attached that you could read their findings in. But Stonington went from total inaction to immediate unilateral action. And they, on the basis of the recommendation of the engineer, immediately posted the bridge. I think the mayor got the letter the very day after Stonington received it. Our highway superintendent was called by his counterpart in Stonington and was caught off guard as to what was going on and didn't know anything about it. They were already mobilizing to post the bridge with signs and wondering where we wanted to have them put in Ledyard. And I intervened and said, nowhere but on our side of the bridge going south. I said, that's it. That's all we're going to look for now. So it's posted at a 8-ton limit with a provision, as the engineer has stated, to go up to 12 tons in emergency circumstances, which doesn't really cover the full range of emergency vehicles, obviously, that would need to traverse that bridge. But more looming in a more ominous way is basically an implied 6-month window that a certain range of minimal repairs has to be done in order for it to even be kept open at the 8-ton limit. So we're probably 2 months into that 6-month window. Most recently, the Stonington Board of Finance approved half of the funding necessary to proceed with an interim repair that would only keep it open at the 8-ton limit. And that's 50,000 with the understanding that Ledyard would come alongside with another 50,000. And so the way I have framed the background on this motion is that the town proceed to secure a better mutual agreement, not to just nurse this along, but to return to a commitment to do a full, appropriate, suitable replacement as soon as possible, with all that's necessary to maybe resurrect the permit and then get state local bridge funding. And I've talked to the representative at the DOT about that, and he said we're at square zero. We have to go all the way back and apply for the funding, because it was rescinded at the point that we could not proceed within the window of time that we were originally projecting that we could. So we have to, though, I think before we undertake those steps, get an appropriate agreement with the town of Stonington in one way or another. A lot of people are pretty worked up about this. I've also attached a letter from the Old Mystic Fire District Chief, who expressed the severe hazards that would really face people with respect to emergency services. There are residents in North Stonington, Ledyard, and Stonington, not many in Stonington, but at least one with access north of the bridge to their property, that are affected by this. Not to mention all the people in the region going on that main road without having to take an extensive detour. So it's got attention now, I think, and there might be a possibility that we could secure a much better understanding rather than just chip in $50,000 for nothing, really. And honestly, it'd be much better to put 50,000 towards something that's permanent as opposed to temporary. So I don't know. That's the way I framed it, and I'll defer to the mayor for further comment on that if he wants to add his perspective.
Sure. So I share a lot of Steve's feelings on this. I think that we part ways a little bit in regards to the $50,000, because my concern is the alternative is in 6 months, they close the bridge and they make 2 horrendous dead ends for us. And so if Stonington is not prepared or funded to do the bridge replacement, then I think the $50,000 is probably well spent if it gets us 5 to 10 years of continued use and not have 2 terrible dead ends over there. And from the WMC report, it looks like about 1,200 cars a day traverse that bridge. So one of the things that, hopefully our counterparts in Stonington will remember is a comment was made over in Stonington that, well, it affects very, very few Stonington residents. And that could be said in a lot of places all over every town in Connecticut. We have people that cross our roads on the way to Groton or Norwich or wherever. And it doesn't mean that we choose to neglect those roads because they're just passing through. That's not how it works. But I have asked to have a discussion with the finance chair of Stonington through the first selectman of Stonington. And I do anticipate that that will happen. And what I'm hoping to have happen is to have that discussion really about, which is what I had with the first selectman in Stonington, which is we had a signed MOU. If we go the route of a signed MOU again, I want this MOU to be something that survives my time in this seat as well as hers, because it needs to get done. The bridge is in a really poor state of repair. It ranked the worst of all Stonington bridges. It was at the absolute bottom. So something does need to get done with it. So I'm hoping that next week we will be having a discussion and that we can make some headway and some progress with our neighbors in Stonington.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Tom, Andra, your comments or questions?
I agree with the mayor.
Yeah, I liked Steve's description of the deathbed conversion. I'm kind of thinking like, where did this come from? They were reluctant for so long, and then, now we're stuck here. But yeah, I don't think I have anything to add.
Okay, thank you. The Old Mystic Fire Department's letter made a point about how long it takes to get to locations on that road, and they are actually closer to many of the addresses on Lantern Hill Road than Ledyard Fire Company. And so they respond and often are on scene before Ledyard. And if that bridge were to be closed, Ledyard would be able to get there quicker, not because they're closer, but because it would make Old Mystic so far away. And one fire, one fatality would put this entire discussion into a huge imbalance. So in my opinion, as has already been said, we don't look at bridges based on who they serve. If a bridge is in our inventory, we maintain it as does every other town, as does the state. It's part of the infrastructure. You don't make decisions about whether to maintain them based on whether it serves all or some of your population. So I'm in favor of fixing it right. I'm not in favor of a temporary fix. The temporary fix will further restrict emergency vehicles. And again, the liability, it just makes the whole agreement seem small in comparison to potential loss of property and life. So I'm in favor of authorizing the mayor to enter into these negotiations.
Bill, if I could share one more thing I failed to include. I also had a discussion with our senator and both of our representatives about this, just to see if there was anything that they could do to help support moving this along, because the bridge is in such bad condition. So I will also, as part of this, follow up with them now that they are in session and see if there's anywhere we can go with that too.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate
And I'll
that.
just add one more thing that I forgot to mention. It's probably a given and known. This is a bridge that straddles the Stonington-Ledyard line. So it's 50-50 in terms of its location. It is actually on the DOT's list. It's identified as a Stonington Bridge, but they had to pick one town or the other. So I don't think that means a whole lot. In fact, the DOT rep said it really doesn't mean a whole lot. When we first went through this to secure DOT funding, Ledyard has a higher percentage of eligibility for reimbursement. So Ledyard, I took the lead on behalf of Ledyard to secure the grant. So that gave both towns actually a higher percentage, and that might still be the way it would go if we reach a mutual accord.
Good point. Thank you. You guys ready to vote?
Mhm.
All in favor, please say aye.
Counselor Ingalls votes aye.
Counselor Malone votes aye.
Counselor Solomon votes aye. Motion passes. Thank you all. Okay, next item, please.
I make a motion to authorize the mayor to enter into an agreement with the Providence and Worcester Railroad Company for repair to the Browns Crossing Road Bridge over the railroad.
Is there a second?
Counselor Ingalls seconds.
Thank you. Discussion.
Can I
Steve?
get some history here, please?
Oh, Mary, you were going to give us some past history on this bridge. Thank you. Please.
And also welcome to Bridge Night at the Ledyard Finance Committee.
Right. Here's a continuing saga of another bridge.
So Steve, why don't you start with this, and then I'll pull up the rear
Well,
on.
I don't think
Mayor,
Steve is around.
Mayor,
but This is going way back.
Yeah, it is way back. It is way back. Well,
Right.
All right, so I'll give you a quick rundown. So,
Well, Mayor,
Wait,
I
let
think
me-
Mary wants to give us some of the early history.
oh,
of it
Mary has
first.
background. Okay.
Yeah.
Right,
I'm sorry.
okay. Back in the 80s, and I can't remember the year, but the tonnage was lessened on the bridge. And the neighbors were concerned because the oil delivery trucks were not going to be able to get across, nor ambulances. So we had discussions with Providence and Worcester, and they owned the bridge, but they didn't want to pay for anything. And just like with Stonington, we dithered back and forth and nothing happened. And somebody said, well, there's another way that you can get over to Brown's Crossing at the end of Bluff Road. So I went down to Bluff Road, and probably, Fred, you'll remember the Shaftsmas. They had children your age. Okay, the Shaftsmas lived at the end of Bluff Road, right in the kind of the cul-de-sac. Back in the day, you could see a slight hill, which was grass covered. And you could, at the end of that, you looked up and you saw a house. So the Shaftsmas told me that the house was owned by an elderly couple in New Jersey. So I contacted them and said, would it be possible for us, because you could take a car and go from Shaftsmas back along Brown's Crossing. And I said, would it be possible for us to use that, area in front of your house, that kind of road in front of your house, just for emergency vehicles, just for oil trucks, or just for the ambulance or fire truck? Absolutely not. No way, no how. We got threatened with lawyers, etc. They eventually died, and I tried to deal with the son. Last name is Frost. And he said, no, absolutely not. So when I saw this on the agenda, I went back today to see what happened in those years. So went down to the end of Bluff Road. That area that was grassed is now blacktopped, and there was a whole bunch of cars. So you could just see the top of the house. So I went around, crossed the bridge, and went to the right. On the left was the Peterson house, and I think they called it Red Top, the white building that belongs to either Harvard or Yale. So I went up, and I got to the end, and there is this huge black fence across the property. So there's no way that you could get from Brown's Crossing out to Bluff Road in an emergency. And it almost looks like that house is there all by itself, because I don't know if a fire truck or an ambulance could cross the bridge and go down that kind of dirt road and get to their house. Anyway, I was just brought back memories of trying to deal with somebody to try to, and if we were able to get through, you wouldn't have to really fix the bridge, because there's only, I think, 1 or 2 families over there at this point.
So that's probably a good segue, Mary, into Steve, and then I'll bring up the rear if you want, Steve.
Okay, so picking up where Mary left off, in the late 90s,
Okay. Yeah.
the town put a water main, as you know, through the village and other places, but went past the house that was now, at that time, owned by the Primos. It was kind of a difficult dance to get that authority, but the water line was run all the way down to the Peterson house.
Oh, okay.
Beyond the end of Bluff. But subsequent to that point, the Primos secured access completely, put the fence up, and did other things to prevent. So the mystery is, in 20 years, here we are, how have they lived without the appropriate weight limit or capacity on this bridge
Mhm.
to secure oil services. Certainly emergency services would not have sent the vehicles over there that would have been threatened by such a low load limit. But at any rate, along the way, I just kind of coincidentally with some discussions I had with people asking questions down that way, received a call from a gentleman, an engineering or a management company, engineering/management company who represents the P&W Railroad, seeking to work together toward a permanent solution. And this has all evolved now over almost a year, and leading up to through back and forth and various different other side conversations to a letter it's a confidential letter. It's a confidential settlement communication. So that I think has been provided to the appropriate parties to go forward.
Mhm.
But the bottom line is that the railroad would like to provide a permanent solution to this under, I think, very favorable terms, as long as the town going forward would take ownership of this and manage it going forward. So the mayor is very aware of the details of this, as we've talked back and forth several times, and in a couple cases, the two of us directly with representatives from P&W. And so I think it's a very good spot right now to bring this to permanent resolution. And I think everyone's nearly on the same page as much as people understand what's on the page.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think that this step here will allow the mayor to go forward more definitively and come to an agreement with all the parties, the stakeholders, including the three property owners across the bridge, the Petersons, Dave DiPietro, who's the one on the end down by the Primos, and Harvard there.
So
So
the Primos, are they going to stay just isolated where they are?
are you talking about, no, DiPietro is the one who I think you're talking about, the one that's, or are you talking about the one at the end of Bluff?
The end, no, this is actually Brown's Crossing.
Okay, no, that's Dave
It used to
DiPietro.
be Frost. It used to be,
Dave DiPietro.
okay, okay.
The Primos, or Mrs. Primo, I think he passed away. She is the one at the end of Bluff. And
Okay,
this would allow a solution. The mayor, I mean, without getting into any details, we were looking at other ways to
okay,
get to these properties without
Right,
having a
right.
bridge brought to highway standards. But this now brings us to the point where the most simple way forward is to get a bridge to full highway rated standards. It's a single lane, but you wouldn't really need more with the amount of traffic we're talking about.
right,
And
right.
would preclude having to do anything off the end of Bluff, which any way you shake it would be a little bit complex.
Yes, yes. I agree.
So what we did was, there was real question about ownership, and P&W still alluded to they were unsure of the ownership. So what we did was we had a historical title search done,
Yeah. I saw
and
that.
they brought it way back into the early 1800s, where I believe it was a Carl Brown who owned all the property down there.
Mhm.
Made his deal with the old New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad steam railway. And part of that deal was putting in this bridge. So over time, obviously at that point, it was a horse and carriage type bridge. And now it's just a wooden structure, a fairly lightweight wooden structure.
Mhm.
But we did have conversations with Providence and Worcester, and they said, well, there's been other instances where these towns have taken these on because they are, it provides access, public access. And I said, well, in this case, as soon as you cross the bridge, you're on private property. So this bridge will not be serving more public access way. So I asked him if he would provide an example of that they have done this in other situations. And I don't think you received one, Steve, and I didn't receive one because I don't think it really exists where the bridge goes in and it doesn't continue as a public roadway. Just actually the driveway on the other side of Browns Crossing Bridge is owned by the Petersons. So no public access is over there. But back to Steve's point, I think where we are with it now is very favorable in terms of the bridge that exists now actually shakes when I drive over it with my pickup truck.
Yeah, right. I went over it today.
I can't even imagine, 80,000 pound oil trucks going over that, or emergency services or anything else, moving trucks, propane trucks, you name it. So I think we have an opportunity to make this right for Harvard, for DPHO, and for the Petersons, and get a much more formidable permanent structure in there.
Committee members, your thoughts?
Let's do it. When stuff like this goes on for so long and someone presents a viable solution, let's just do it.
Yeah. Councilor Malone?
I agree.
Me too. All in favor? Please say aye.
Aye from Councilor Ingalls.
Tom?
Aye.
And Councilor Solomon votes aye as well. Motion passes. Mayor, Steve, Mary, thank you. A lot of work and a lot of time went into this.
Yep.
Thank
I
you.
think
And a
it's
good
gonna be
solution.
good year for bridges, I hope. One other thing, I had thrown this out there on the land for land use, planning and public works also, just because I wasn't sure it's infrastructure. If you don't think that's necessary to go forward with them, it's possible this can get on the next council meeting rather than wait another cycle. So I just throw that out there. I didn't put it on there for any other reason than making sure I crossed every T and dotted every I.
So normally we go to land use first. Finance is usually the last one to vote. On this particular one, I would think the land use would want to weigh in on it.
Okay.
Bill, would that be for both the bridges, Lantern Hill and the Browns Crossing?
I would think so. I know the land use has acted on previous discussions and motions on the Lantern Hill Bridge, so I would think they'd want to have a say. And I would be okay with them, with us pushing it or recommending it and putting it over to them and then making the final recommendation to the council. I think that'd be the right thing to do.
Okay.
That would put it on the land use February 1st meeting, and then it would go to the council on the 10th
Okay.
of
So that-
February.
3 weeks away.
Yeah, I think that's
what's the
fine. I
impact?
don't think the urgency demands it
Okay.
any necessarily sooner than that.
All right.
I agree.
Great. All right. Let's do it then. All right. Thank you both. Is there any other business to come before the committee?
Bill, can I give you a quick rundown on where we
Sure.
are with the town budget? And I apologize. I mistakenly thought we had an agenda item on for tonight for this. So last night I should have. So my mistake. So where we are right now, the budget I think is looking very good. It will be delivered on March 1st. We do have some reductions in revenues in the form of the $500,000 in the Pequot Fund, which we lobbied the state to secure, which we had for 2 years, but the 2 years are now up. So I will be going back to lobby for an additional $500,000 a year for this biennial budget cycle. My preference, of course, is a total reformulation of the Pequot Fund, but I don't think that's going to happen in this legislative session. So I will be looking for that. So hopefully that will come together. There is an additional an increase for the pension funding this year. However, we're still at 83.6%, which is great. And the light is clearly at the end of the tunnel now. We're down to 6 years to be fully funded on the pension obligation. So that's really, we'll be in a great position at that point. As you know, some of the drivers, the debt from the schools and the PD, $4.8 million for this coming fiscal year. That is up about $700,000 from last year. The Board of Ed, as you know, was about $491,000 additional. That is exclusive of the as much as 9% healthcare cost increase. So that's a big one, and we're not going to really know that until April. And the other one, which is also important, is that the roads have done very well. Actually, I think they're right at the same number, about 83.6. So the pension funding level is about the same as our road rating right now from Beta Engineering. Steve is looking for $1,015,000. We provided him just shy of that last year, and it really helped boost the road rating up. So the other one, of course, is the grand list, 7.57% jump. That was the highest jump in at least the last 10 years. And truthfully, the first double-digit jump in our grand list valuation in the last 10 years. So I think the budget's looking good. I think there will be people that will be getting tax decreases this year. I can't say that across the board because we did samplings of the revals this year, and more modest homes like in the Highlands and Christie Hill, just the sampling that I took saw about a 16% increase in value. The kind of median homes are more around 14%. The higher end homes like Sablewoods and the upper end of Bittersweet were only up 6.6%. So the properties that are hot on the market, that are the highest value right now, are also the more modest homes. So the reason I say that is that people with homes of that valuation could quite possibly see a tax increase. So I'd rather not, but we're working hard to continue to bring it down. We just finished our work with all department heads last week. So now we sit here and comb through line item by line item, trimming stuff down before we deliver it to you for your work. So, but that's where we are with it right now. I think I'm happy to see where we are with the roads. I know it was an expensive proposition to get the roads where they are, but we're there now. So hopefully we can keep that up.
Good report, Mayor. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Happy to hear that. Okay, any other business? I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We are adjourned at 5:56 p.m. Thank you, everyone, for attending. We'll see you next week.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you. See you in a bit, Bill.
Good night.